Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carvan Recommendations Episode 3. And today we have with us a very special guest, Professor Pushpesh Pant. He doesn't need an introduction. He is a teacher, lifelong teacher, an expert on international relations and culinary history. He has written many books, especially India Cookbook, which is one of the best and a collector's addition to any library. He is very kind enough to join us this morning to talk about books, to talk about music, and to talk about movies and also food with all of us. So, without further ado, I welcome Professor Pant for this conversation. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation.
As usual, always my pleasure, Ishan. It's a delight to talk to you. And I think you have given me an opportunity to relive an experience which was not always pleasant during the COVID. I don't think that the COVID lockdown was pleasant or even sufferable for any one of us. Some suffered great bereavements. But I suppose what happened is that when you are confined to a corner in your house, you are partly at times in quarantine, you are forced to go back to things which in the hustle and bustle of your everyday life you tended to neglect. Book reading is one of the most important things, I think, which has suffered in past. But I think what happened during the corona lockdown is after I recovered from a rather mild bout of corona in December, my son was taking precautions and he would not let me get out of the room. He said, "Why don't you read your old books? You keep buying, keep." And he always has been complaining that I acquire more books than I can either read or store. Or let's put it the other way around, I can read and he can store properly. So the books are spread all over the place, and he says, "ये तो तुमने पढ़ी नहीं होगी." Now it has come to my grandchildren who say, "Have you read all these books?" So it puts you into a slightly embarrassing situation. If you say that, "No, I have read all the books which I buy and order and borrow from library," nobody is going to believe you. But the point is, you tend to go back to books which you had probably not read well enough between the lines and you want to reread. There are always books which tempt you through book reviews, through publishers' notices. And before we proceed, I must share with you an autobiographical detail. For past almost 60 years, I have had a very interesting relationship with a legendary iconic bookseller in Delhi called the Midland Bookshop. I started buying books for them on installment, 2 rupee book paid over 4 weeks when I was a research scholar in Sapru House. And the Beg Saab, the Dada Mia, now um, used to sell books on footpath, some of them second hand, most of them second hand, some of them first hand. But they have grown very big. There is a Midland bookshop in Arvindo Place, there is a Midland bookshop in South Extension, there is a Midland bookshop in Indian Oil Building in Jampat, there is a new Midland in Gurgaon, and they are exporters and they are importers of high value remainder books. So most of my reading has been courtesy the Midland Bookshop, and I have dealt with three generations by now. Uh, the Dada Mia Afsar Beg and his son Zubair Beg and his brother Tausif and his cousins Usman and the rest. It is a relationship which is very odd. What happened during the COVID, and that is how this is relevant. The father told his son that Dr. Pant has not been able to come to the shop for a long time. I think there are some books which he used to browse and would be interested in. Why did you dispatch them to him? So what Zubair did was to pack about 20 books in a cardboard corrugated box and drove up to Gurgaon at a reasonable risk when the lockdown was there, curfew was there. But he had a curfew pass because he'd been doing a lot of NGO work also, supplying food to the daily labor, etc. He dumped the books inside. Dumped is a bad word, but when I opened the thing, it was almost like a child, lighting up with the gift which has received. So there were very nice new books. The book which I started with almost immediately was The Light of Asia by Jairam Ramesh. Now, Jairam Ramesh is a friend. I can't say a close friend, but in past we have worked together when he was not in politics, when he was not even an MP, and he's a fascinating person. Now, he's almost a Renaissance man, an IIT graduate who has shifted to economics analysis, who writes very elegantly, and his earlier books had impressed me greatly, which I reread, which I had read them first, but I thought I would compare and say whether how he's growing as a writer, he's growing as a historian. And this book, The Light of Asia, is a fascinating book in the sense that it is a story of a poem written by Sir Edwin Arnold, which was in our textbooks when we were doing class 10th more than 6 decades back. It has been a poem which has had a very deep impact on a variety of people, from Mahatma Gandhi, who was drawn to Krishna and Gita because of this thing. Then he went from Light of Asia to Gita, and then to from Buddha to Krishna and Gita and Asatyug. That's a different story. But the same poem was also read by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. The, the poem was read by Yogi Arvindo. The poem was read by Rabindranath Tagore. The poem left a deep mark on Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, it is not only the Jairam Ramesh is giving you who are the great men who read these things. What he does is a fascinating job. He is putting the story of Sir Edwin Arnold in a context of the times. So I did not know before I read this book that Sir Edwin Arnold had come to India as a principal as a very young age of the college, Ferguson College in Pune. Now, he had come as a principal in his early 20s in Pune and took a deep interest in the affairs of Pune. And he had a very interesting relationship with his students, colleagues, and so on. So, Jairam evokes Pune of that time and Arnold also. Then Edwin Arnold goes over looking for connections for the story. And this story becomes the tale of places, the other people who were having no interest in maybe what Edwin Arnold was doing. But there is Vallapole Dharmapala of Sri Lanka, and you get involved into the Buddhist story, what the Buddhists were doing. And Edwin Arnold was helping him out reclaim another place of worship, the Bodh Gaya Bodh temple. So there were interesting issues. Now we live in times where place of worship dispute ownership is from Ram Mandir to Gyan Vapi to Krishna Janma Bhoomi to various other mosques is a contentious issue. But even 100 years back, you have this interesting story. Now, the interesting thing about this book again is that Jairam, like all his preceding books, is a scrupulous historian of sorts who relies on primary sources. He goes into correspondence, he goes into archival material, and the absolutely stunning thing about this book, I think, is that he has managed to do that during the lockdown period, written this book during the lockdown period. Now, you may envy him that he has good contacts, he has contacts everywhere. His having been an ex-minister, his being a MP allows him access to things which are denied to others. But he is a very generous person. He writes somewhere that some Indian wrote a doctoral dissertation on this poem. He compares it with the doctoral dissertation written by an American student. And he says we should not judge the two together because an Indian student doing a doctoral dissertation in 70s was doing it in a literally shoestring budget, no field trips, no grants. So he is fair and generous to various people. He acknowledges his debts very well. But this reads like a part biography, part autobiography, part a whodunit tale, is a mystery story, and the climax comes in the end. I should not ruin the climax for the other readers who are going to read it. He he chases or he traces the great grandchildren of Edwin Arnold in different parts of the world. And that again is a very, very interesting story of how, like a banyan tree, from a small seed grows a massive tree, and that it has, branches and roots spreading in all directions. So, this is one book which, fascinated me, and I will hold it up for you. I think this is Jairam Ramesh's, uh, The Light of Asia, which I thought was a fascinating book to read. Another book has been lying around with me. Not that I had not read it. I had read it more than once. I had had the pleasure of meeting the author in a Mountain Echoes Literary Festival at Abbotsford a couple of years back before the lockdown started, uh, at Janvi Prasad's house in Nainital. A great place, a small boutique hotel, known to very few people. But I think when things improve, somebody like you should spend some time there. Mayank Austin Sufi had done that. And there, Stephen Alter's book, The Wild Himalayas. I think you are familiar with the book and you know of the book. I think this is the kind of book which one feels, I wish I had written it. Not that I had the capacity, equipment, discipline, sensitivity to do it, But this again is an extremely interesting story, the story of an American family which came as missionaries and started teaching in the Woodstock in Missouri, and the kids grew up there. I mean, his brother was the famous actor Alter, the other Alter, Stephen Alter, not Stephen's younger brother, he was there, who died of cancer some time back. But Stephen Alter has done in this book a fascinating thing. He travels on an American passport, but he remains at heart in India. Why he travels on an American passport is extremely understandable. It allows him to travel to prohibited areas in Pakistan where no Indian can set foot. In borderlands, the northwest frontier provinces, the tribal areas, Gilgistan, Baltistan. He also allows the American passport allows him to travel, or did in the past, to travel into Tibet, which is now under Chinese control. So when he talks of Himalayas, he has unfettered access to Uttarakhand, Garhwal, Pakistan, Tibet, Karakoram, and so on. And this book is written in beautifully chiseled small essays, which goes into butterflies, flora and fauna, autobiographical detail about encountering leopards in his cottage in Missouri. There is myth, there is legend, there is folklore, and it is done with such a brilliant light touch. And Aleph, I think, need to be congratulated, like Penguin needs to be congratulated for Jairam's books, Stephen Alter's book. Now, this book has won awards, has won great critical acclaim. Uh, I don't know how Jairam Ramesh's book is faring. I have a feeling that his other books will draw a greater readership, like Entwined Lives, Mrs. Gandhi and Haksar, or the checkered brilliance, Krishna Menon, because those are controversial political subjects where you say, or an environmental history of Mrs. Gandhi's reign. So those issues, I'm afraid, are going to distract readers of Jairam to this. And I look forward to Jairam's other books because I think his having been out of power is not the word, out denied the preoccupations of politics as a Congress party leader, but you can't keep a good man down. I think his second innings as a historian and as a writer is very, very impressive. He tweets, he writes columns, he engages people, but what he finds time to spend on his primary scholarly pursuits. So that's one part. And Stephen Alter, again, is engaged in so many things, from community work in the Missouri Landor area to what he does, travels extensively. And the sheer elegance of style of writing of this book. And what he does, it is like chiseled gems which have brilliant light reflected on all sides. I was reading my good friend Vikram Grewal's The Field Guide to Indian Birds, which again is very, very good. I think Om has published it, but that is for a specialist. In this case, he talks almost as an aside about a bird, about a plant, about a wild animal, about his chance encounter with a local person in a village over the years. And you suddenly have these comparisons without his telling you, see, look, I'm telling you this. So you think for yourself. So this is Wild Himalayas. I was born and brought up in a place called Bukteshwar, which was a 8,000 feet research station for a veterinary research, surrounded by villages on all sides. I remember my childhood when our classmates in school used to walk back 8 to 10 miles, not 10, 8 to 9 miles was the outer limit, with torches in their hands and shouting so the man-eater would not pounce the last man in the troop. So there were man-eaters lurking then. So I have living memory of hills which now have been totally spoiled. He doesn't make a plea for environmental conservation. But I think the book sets you thinking about your roots and what Himalayas have meant, not only to Pahadis, but what Himalayas mean to anybody anywhere. So, I was working on a very stupid enterprise during Corona. I was trying to finish work on a clamor for IAS on culture and heritage of India, just to see how much I remembered of my shared legacy. And it came back to me when I was reading Stephen Alter that there is a stone carving in Mahabalipuram, the descent of Ganga, in that flawed rock which has a big gap in between, where the rainwater seems to descend and makes it as an installation. But then you see that you have is not just Ganga. It is Ganga, it is the mountains, it's the flora and fauna which come into folklore. So this book, I think, again, enchanted me throughout the period of lockdown. The book which again I enjoyed going back to was not a recent book. It was Diana X. Sacred Geography of India. And I'm sure you are familiar with the work. And here it is, uh, Diana Ek has done a brilliant book on Kashi, the city of light. She writes very engagingly in a scholarly fashion. She doesn't get into controversies like Wendy Dodzinger or Tushke, but she writes from her experience and solid scholarship. And this book reminded me of the essays I had written long years ago in Hindi by Vasudev Sharan Agrawal, Bhumi Ko Devatva Pradhan. So consecration of land and consecration of land is strange. Now, Devban, the madrasa, gets its name from Devban, a sacred grove, which goes back to Hindu times and is now an Islamic seminary. So these things are apart, but this book was very good. The other two books, briefly, which I would like to recommend to my audience through you, courtesy you, is Mahabharata. Now, Mahabharata has inspired writing from different quarters of people for different reasons. And I think what I like most is the edition which has come out quite some time back by Chaturvedi Badrinath, Mahabharata, an inquiry into human condition. Now, this may not give you the narrative of Mahabharata in a straight. If you really are a purist, you may go to Vivek Dev Roy's 13-volume translation of Mahabharata word by word, and the appendix in Harivansha, and then the Bhagavad Purans, and his translations of Purans, and his translations of Valmiki Ramayana. I'm very fond of literal translations, as Vivek Dev Roy does. Uh, but I think there is a great purpose in inquiry into Mahabharata, like it takes you to essays of Ramanujam, in one of his essays he says it's not a question of deciding what is right, what is wrong, who's right, who's wrong. It is an inquiry into who's relatively more right or relatively more wrong. So Chaturvedi Badrinath makes it very accessible to an English reader, far better than the pompous Gursaran Das's the difficulty of being, you know, so that thing is, he has his claims to Sanskrit scholarship and interest and so on. But I think Chaturvedi Badrinath has interesting comments on selected shlokas of mm, Mahabharata, and it allows you to ponder over things like eating beef, not eating beef, eating carrion, not eating carrion, the discourses between the Chandal and the Vishwamitra, the discourses between uh, Bhishma and other people. So there are those dilemmas of life which are so relevant in the contemporary times that it allows you to get stimulated and think for yourself. Now, very briefly, one other book which I would like to recommend. I mean, I don't know how easy it is to acquire is Bhartrihari's Shataks. There are three Shataks. There is a Shingar Shatak, there is a Vairagi Shatak, and there is a Niti Shatak. So either people read the Shingar Shatak or they read the Vairagya Shatak. Or some of the Niti Shatak are, the shloks are in Shubhashits and people think that they know it all. But I think I have a very old edition from Motilal Banarsi Das, uh, Mr. Kane's edition with Anvay in English and Anvay in Sanskrit, and it's not very difficult to follow if you make the effort. So I think it is, to my mind, a very interesting thing because it ranges between erotic and renunciatory. So the two moods of attachment to the love, sex, and waning of desire and the death, imminent intimations of mortality, the Bhartrihari Shataks seem to, be very of immediate concerns. A human condition, intimation of mortality, and so on. So these are the books which I would like to talk to you about. I would also like to recommend very strongly Jairam Ramesh's creation, The Light of Asia. I would like to recommend very strongly, although it's a couple of years old book, The Wild Himalayas. I would very much like people to get hold of a copy of the Mahabharata of Chaturvedi Badrinath till the fictionalized account in 3 volumes of Shashidharan is available more widely. Only the first volume is here. It's been reviewed brilliantly. I have read the reviews. I have read the first few pages with great involvement. But I would wait till I have finished all three. So that's what I wanted to talk about books. Books in the first place.
Thank you so much, sir, for that recommendation. If we would we if we were to ask you, what do you think are the benefits of reading, and why should history students, or students in particular, should read more books?
Now, that is a very difficult question to answer. Why should we read books and what is the benefit? I don't think that this takes us to the philosophical debate about utilitarianism and aestheticism. I mean, I don't think that there is such a dichotomy or a binary relationship between the two. Whatever gives you joy, whatever allows you to transcend the misery and the confines of the material world, liberates your mind. And the books hold, to borrow Barbara Tuchman's phrase in which she was writing about the First World War, they hold sometimes a distant mirror, sometimes not too distant a mirror. So you are in a position to examine the present in the light of past. You can revisit the past, which is a foreign country remaining, I hopefully without your prejudices and transposing them in past. This is what all great poetry about. That is what the Rasa Siddhanta is. So if the Rasa is Brahma, then of course uh, reading is akin to brahmacharya, akin to meditating, akin to contemplation and reflection. I'm not saying that you read a book literally and you answer a question in exam. What do you mean by reading a book? You read a book and each reader reads a book differently. You read between lines, you have a context, you know something about the author, you did not know anything about the author, you went back to find something about the author. I will give you an example which we were discussing yesterday. One of my favorite books is Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. Now, I quote from memory, it is an odd sentence. I probably do great violence to Rilke, but it runs something like this. He answers the question of a man fighting in trenches who used to send his poems for opinion to Rilke, whether they were good enough. He never says that they are bad poems. He never says that it's not even poetry. But there's a paragraph in one of the letters which says, you have to be born and travel. You have to fall in love and lose love. You have to see a child being born and hear his cry. You have to travel and sleep in different beds in different cities. You might listen to a bar of music wafting through your window. And when you experience death, maybe a line of poetry may come to you or not come to you. Now, if you ponder on these lines, this is the whole purpose of like inspiration for poetry. What will trigger you into a journey inwards and outwards is for your own thing to think. You read something like the Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Now, it is during the First World War, the man who was an adventurist and aristocrat in France, one of the early aviators. Uh, the story can be enjoyed by children, and it can be a parable and a fable for adults also. So then you start thinking, you try to find more about Rilke, you try to find more about something like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. You have a stray line from the Ballad of Reading Jail by Oscar Wilde, walls do not a prison make. Now, these lines came back again and again in a different context to me during the lockdown when you were confined to the four walls, that prison walls do not a prison make. So, what allows you to get out of the prison wall? What reminds you of Faiz? फिर कफस की तीलियों से चल रहा है दूर सा फिर किसी हसरत परवाज की बातें करो. So the book allows you to break out of the cage, take off. Don't treat it as an imprisonment and go. You don't even have to read a book. If you have read the book, good enough. Now, you remember the peasant cantos of Ezra Pound, the villainous poet who was vilified after the Germans lost the divide. He says, what you love most cannot be snatched away from you. So if you have a line of poetry in your head, if you have a snatches of a recollection of a prose, if you remember Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, all happy families are alike, but all unhappy families are alike in their own different way. So those small bits give you infinite time to contemplate the human condition. I think that is the real joy of reading or being read to. And I would refrain from commenting on history students because I don't think the recommendations you prescribe are only for history students. Although I have read with great delight that you are about to graduate in history, subject to your passing your end semester examinations. But I think all of us are history students in a manner of speaking or not. Even if you are a pure scientist or a pure mathematician, you cannot operate in a universe where There is nobody before you and there is nobody after you. So you, like Newton said, I stand on the shoulders of giants. And Newton is passé now, then you have Einstein. And then you have Feynman and the quantum physics. But there is always a history of physics. There is a history of chemistry. There is a history of philosophy. Also, there is a history of mathematics. So you, when you do, there is a history of everything. So all of us, whether we like it or not, are students of history because our life is defined in chronological points of time between birth and death. And then again, I recall a stray sentence from Nabokov's, I think, Speak Memory, where he says, our existence on this planet is a flash illuminated by lightning between two abysses of darkness. So, if I remember correctly and ascribe it correctly, I think this is what reading, the joys, necessity, and benefits are. I don't know whether it answers your question.
No, it definitely did answer my question. And next question that I would like to ask you is, in the time of lockdown, did you discover new movies on the OTT platforms that are there, like Netflix,
Very interesting
Amazon,
question. I
or
did not only
yeah?
discover new movies, I found out many old movies which I had not had the time because they are no longer, you see, we have gone beyond cassette players, CD players, Blu ray players. So, if you want to see an old movie, if you want to see Baji, if you want to see Barsat, if you want to see Mahal, so either you have to have a bad quality Shemaru print on YouTube, or you find yourself not always legally correct platform, but you can see the old movies you have missed very, very greatly. So there is a picture called Sacred Mountain by a Mexican who is strongly influenced by the person I'm talking about. Is a surrealistic film, and the name gives you the impression that he's a Russian influenced by Sarkovsky, but it is basically a movie very much set in Mexico, mind blowing in certain manners. I could go to that, and that was recommended to me. The word recommendation is in currency this morning by my granddaughter. And I have gone to some of those movies. But what was a greater delight for me was that I could go to movies which I had seen long time back, but not had the occasion to revisit. And some of the movies like Andaz, Barsat, Bazi, uh, uh, Dilip Kumar's Udan Khatola, Yahudi. Uh, Now, those things, everybody knows Mughal Azam, but don't, okay, how many know of a thing called Humayun? So you go to that and see the story, like Anarkali, for instance, the whole movie, not this Devdas, not only Devdas of uh, Devdas D of Shah Rukh Khan, not Devdas of Dilip Kumar, not Devdas of PC Barua, Devdas of Sehgal. So how many? This the OTT platform allowed me to do that. So another recommendation which my granddaughter insisted that I do is a BoJack Horseman. Now that is a series, I of course watched Patal Lok. I of course watched Mirzapur. I of course watched, but then they tended to jade. They tended to repeat themselves. The first season was good. Second season was extended. Uh, the movie I enjoyed watching was the Parasite, the Korean movie. But for me, the more satisfying was to nostalgically visit my adolescence and early youth, see Dr. Zhivago again, see Lawrence of Arabia again, and see Citizen Kane again. Uh, those were the things. Go back to try to catch some of the early Ritvik Ghatak. So that was the joy of watching movies. Same, more or less, Ishan, applies to my musical uh, footloose wanderings. I listen to Drupad again and again and again. And now you see what the OTT platform gives you, something like the bar music. If you subscribe to a channel, and even if you are not paying for it, the paywall barrier is there, you get the rendered by same rag rendered by a musician for 10 to 12 minutes. So you have heard Gundecha brothers and you have followed their controversy. You have seen Uday Bawalkar. But we have not known some other people when you come to that Sitaram Tiwari, Siaram Tiwari ji of Betia Gharana, Darbhanga Gharana, or the Mishras of that, or the Maliks of Darbhanga. So you get into not only the famous Dagar brothers, junior or senior, you also get the same rag being rendered in two different gatherings by the same artist, their disciples, their accompaniments. It could be Begum Akhtar, it could be Malka Pukhraj, it could be things of that. And the mention of Malka Pukhraj and Begum Akhtar brings back to my mind another recommendation. This is about the book. Yatindra Mishra has come out with a biography of Begum Akhtar, is a collection of articles on Begum Akhtar. But what I am recommending is the translation. The translation is being done by Manisha Taneja, who was an associate professor of Spanish in Delhi University and ex-JNU. And she is a brilliant translator. She has translated Marquez into Hindi, and she has translated this book the reverse way around from Hindi to English. And what is remarkable in this book is that she has, translated with great fidelity the register of voices and idioms of different people. Like, for instance, Shubha Mudgal in one, a little over a page and a half tribute says that Begum Akhtar could sing like this from Komal Madhyam to four octaves, four notes above and four notes below. And this was her range of voice. And the ghazal she rendered was तुम्हें याद हो मोमिन की हम में तुम में जो करार था. Both the ghazal is being translated brilliantly, and this insight into the technical aspect of the musicality of Begum Akhtar, I think goes unnoticed. There is a long conversation between Begum Akhtar and Acharya Brihaspati, extracted from the archives of All India Radio and reproduced in Sangana, the magazine of Sangeet Natak. Now, Begum Akhtar is almost playing like a cat with a mouse. I mean, I should not say so with all due respect to Acharya Brihaspati. Acharya Brihaspati asks those pedantic questions. And ultimately, Begum Akhtar says, ultimately, the purpose of music is to give you joy, like reading, and like all performing arts. तो मियाँ उसकी बात करिए, भूल जाइए अपने आप को कि ये शास्त्र में क्या कहा था, and so on. So ultimately, she says, आपका कहने का मतलब है, आचार्य जी says, I should go to a goldsmith so he can throw light on how he makes ornaments. And that is where I think the greatest uh, pushback from Begum Akhtar comes. She says, no, you go to a Lohar. And he says, why do you mean, what do you mean by going to a Lohar in an iron smith? And Begum Akhtar says कि आज जो सुनने वाला है उसका दिल पत्थर का है, फौलाद का है, तो फौलाद के सब तो काम लोहारी करेगा ना. So this banter still has been translated in a manner with great degree of sensitivity. So I think it's an education in translation, and Manisha deserves full credit for this. And I think this is one case where the translation probably uh, will make Begum Akhtar read to many more. Now, again, you see, this is the problem. You distract me into diversions. Begum Akhtar, again, I would like to recommend a very heavily a book by Manan Kapoor. Now, this Manan Kapoor has written a biography of Aga Shahid Ali, and he doesn't only give you the required information fascinating about Aga Shahid Ali's growth as a poet in India, writing in English, going back to America, going out to America, growing there as a poet, as a teacher, as a mentor, and also as a person who grew. I mean, he never hid that he was gay, and he and Salim Kidwai were kids just outside their adolescence when they chased Begum Akhtar all over the place. In this book, there is a 3-4 page chapter which talks about Begum Akhtar, which I think gives you the distilled essence of the personality of Begum Akhtar. And I read it with these 3-4 pages. It's a lovely photograph of Salim and Aga in their early youth there also, uh, which allowed me to get insight into Begum Akhtar much more than 400-page book on Begum Akhtar, which others have written. My other friend Kalidas Swaminathan has written Hai Akhtari. I remember another biography of Begum Akhtar written by her disciple Rita Ganguly. But those, I think, become either verbose, not Swami's, or Swami loves his music, Kalidas. So, but it was a much slimmer volume. But I think the size is nothing. This this biography, uh, Map of Longing, uh, I think is a book worth reading. Not only because it evokes Delhi of a particular vintage, Delhi University of a particular vintage, uh, eating places in and around Delhi, and travels in and out of Delhi to Srinagar, back, etc. So I think that is something which I enjoyed doing. Listening to music, I listen to a lot of Begum Akhtar, I listen to a lot of Vidya Rao, who I rate. I'm a great fan of her Tugri singing, very cerebral, very, very cerebral. I mean, and her conversations about gurus. She has a very interesting sentence in one of her interviews. Vidya ji says, "Guru gives you the seed. It is for you to nurture the seed, grow the sapling, and let it grow to a tree and then enjoy the fruit. I enjoyed watching the film which Anish Pradhan has set the music to, The Disciple. I think is being talked about. On the net, it's far easier to see it on the net. It has not been released in India. It's been in a theater. I think now it has been released in the theater, but I don't know under the present circumstances how many people can watch it. I enjoyed it. See. I thought it was far better than a series called Raga Bandish, you know. So the comparisons are odious most of the time, but Disciple was an extremely satisfying film to see musically. And I think that is because it was conceived by musically by Anish Pradhan, and the director had the good sense to do that, and there were no professional actors but professional musicians who played the role. So the hero in this case says, to have the right sentiment for my teacher, I learned for a few days from this gentleman who portrays the Guruji in the film. So it makes you think about the method school of acting, etc., and so on. You know? So I think this much about music, film on OTT platforms during lockdown.
So moving ahead with that, and I agree with you that KL Sehgal's Devdas is better than Dilip Kumar's or even Shah Rukh
Have you seen
Khan's
it?
or even the
Have you seen
Bengali
the PC
version.
Barua one also?
No, I couldn't find
Okay.
that on internet. I think
No,
I have
but
to
I
check.
think it is not a question of who's better. It is a question of
Yeah.
who do you relate to more. Who do you relate to more?
Yes. Yes. I think there was a film of KL Sehgal called
शहनशाह
Shahenshah or
भी थी,
something.
स्ट्रीट
That
सिंगर
was
भी
what.
थी,
Yeah.
तानसेन भी थी. आप अगर if you see the whole work of Sehgal, so he has two roles:
Hmm.
a great singer and an actor of great talent. So, but that's
Yes.
different.
Yes. Yes. So did you cook something during the
No,
pandemic, during
I'll
the
be honest.
lockdown?
I didn't cook because I was not feeling up to it energetic. And I must confess with you, my son Indrajit, who has a PhD in wildlife, flora, fauna, and diplomacy of CITES,
Yes.
also is a trained documentary filmmaker. He's done a crash course at Pune. He's done a year-long course in Avindo Place. Not to give him a plug, but the idea is that he's a brilliant cook. So he would cook
Hmm.
and he would experiment and he cooked a lot of things. Now, the lot of things had to conform to two things. I had to be given a nourishing diet before, during, and after the corona, and he would like to tickle my palate, which was fairly jaded. So he would either make great Shami kebabs, he would make great Kashmiri koftas, he would make Molia
Yeah.
koftas, he would do the Ran Sikandari after marinating it, he would make a brilliant pulao. At the same time, he would make a khichdi. He would make a khichdi which would not be the Bimaro ki khichdi, but the Bhuni Bengali khichdi sort of, or Mash ki khichdi of the Makar Sankranti variety. Or he would do a khichdi which he picked up from a chef friend of mine, Nishant Chaturvedi, which is a Rajma ki khichdi with a freshly made urad ki badi on top, you know. So it kept happening. And somewhere just before the lockdown, we were shooting for a company called Round Glass, archival material for Indian food. So we did Uttarakhand food and we did UP food. And when we say UP food, you know, UP food is a universe of its own. It could be Ruhilla food from Badaयूं, Sambal, Amroha, Muradabad. It could be Shia regal food from Rampur. It could be Lucknowi, Awadhi, Razakat from Faizabad. It could also be provincial Awadh, it where churrat ki roti and arhar ki dal and bharta and chukha would be there. There would be Banaras and the influence of Bhojpur, and you would have Muslim cuisine, Shia cuisine, aristocratic cuisine, street cuisine, chaat, and then sweets and so on. So we tried doing, replicating a lot of things which we could not buy outside at home. From machli ke kebab to, he did a brilliant job. So he would never cook more than one dish. But it may be a simple begun ka bhaja taken off from Bengal. It could be a chokha taken off from Bihar. It could be something which he had learned from my mother, aloo dum Bengali, or he would like to do the aloo dum Kashmiri, which a friend Rashmi Dar had taught him. He would, he has dexterous fingers and he keeps watching things. So he would make simple namak ki boti, which he has learned from internet from a Pakistani show. So I did not cook, but I ate very well. I mean, let's put it this way. And it was a great satisfaction. And also, the Italian embassy was very kind to me. They invited me to cook for them. I could not do that because of Corona thing. I was down, but they sent some brilliant pasta, some rock salt, some Italian cheese, some tomato uh, puree to make the simplest of dishes. Uh, the pasta with tomato sauce with just the grated cheese, and of course there was a bottle of nice wine. So we enjoyed food without stepping out of the house. The other interesting thing which took place was that lots of friends who used to work for restaurants had to shut shop, and they started takeaway service. So I've been very fortunate that people like Osama bin Jalali, people like Zubair Beg, who's running a Hyderabad house thing, people like Nishant Chaturvedi, who's consulting with two restaurants, one in Delhi, one in Bangalore, three actually, one in Bangkok, which is Michelin plated. They would keep sending me things to try and eat, and including Izzat Hussain, who's from Lucknow. So I was lucky in the sense that at times it made me feel very bad. I did not even pay for it. And the food would come home, कि बताइए कैसा है? And one could eat well and give them their objective opinion. There is a friend I lost due to Corona, Anirban Bora. And Anirban Bora was a great cartoonist, caricaturist who was a deputy editor in uh, Economic Times. He used to do Gastronomica Syndicus. Uh, and he was a great food lover. And I think he got killed because he stepped out of the house recklessly to eat even during the Corona lockout period. And he had diabetes, he had other obesity problems, but he has married to a Thai lady called Sarithia, and they were running a restaurant, a takeaway from their fourth floor apartment uh, in Indirapuram, and they serve fabulous Thai food. And they had just branched off before tragedy struck the family to Bengali food as well. From traditional Bengali food like mocha cutlet, deviled eggs, Kolkata biryani. So over the past 3 4 months, I have been very well served in terms of food, which I did not cook. So I must confess this. At times, my son would cook typically pahadi khana, very poor man's food, aloo ki thechwani, where you just crush the aloos with silvatta and just a little mustard oil, just a little salt, just few shredded red chilies. That's it. No masala, not even ghee ka tadka, not even zira, not even haldi, not even dhania. That's really the poorest of the poor man's food, which nobody eats. But it's the reverse now. Now you eat it now, and you suddenly discover the joys of poverty, what I call riches of poverty.
You mentioned Kolkata biryani, so I think a question should be a comparison between Awadhi biryani and the Kolkata biryani. Which one do you like more, or do you like Hyderabadi biryani or Rampuri biryani?
No, actually, I find the question rather amusing coming from you, Ishan, because there is no such thing as Lucknowi biryani. If you recall Mr. Sharar's book, The Last Phase of Oriental Culture, he categorically says कि लखनऊ वाले तो बिरयानी को मालगोबा समझते हैं. उनके लिए तो जो अच्छी चीज़ है वो यखनी पुलाव है. एंड इफ यू गो बैक टू द लिंग्विस्टिक एविडेंस, लोग पूछते हैं कि मरने के बाद किसी के क्या होगा, तो कहते हैं कि साहब रिश्तेदार आके खाएंगे पुलाव, पढ़ेंगे फाता. तो वो और आदमी ख़याली पुलाव पकाया करता था. So what was famous in Lucknow and Awadh was pulao. You would not find a reference to biryani in any text before a certain period. It's only when the refugees descended on Lucknow and biryani became a more elaborate, more exotic, more expensive food, there was a version of Lucknowi biryani कि साहब हमें हमारी बिरयानी सबसे बेहतर है. Now, the trouble is that if you talk to Salma ji, and she will be talking to you on the thing, she would have a very elaborate explanation of birinji biryani, biryani coming from Persia, and a biryani not even using rice, only being cooked with rumali roti and cooked zamidos and so on. But essentially, what a good cook, great cook actually, not a good cook, but a great cook from Lucknow explained to me, two actually of them, Muhammad Farooq, son of Fakhri Alam, who died at the age of 104 from Bawarchi Tola, and Dr. Izzat Hussain, a trained Unani physician from the Ferengi Mahal. So he says something very interesting. Birinj does include rice. It is fried rice of sorts. But it doesn't mean that one biryani is like asking, which devdas do you like? So the point is that मुझे एक बार विलायत हुसैन खान साहब ने समझाया था कि मियाँ ये मत पूछो कि कौन राग किस वक्त गाया जाता है, पूछो ये कि तुम किस राग में हो और क्या राग सुनना चाहते हो. So I think it is what mood you are in to eat. So if you are in the mood to eat a complicated dum ki biryani, aromatic, flavorful, you would probably settle for Hyderabadi biryani. Aromatic, subtle. But if you, and I'm not talking about the chicken biryani, I don't think chicken biryani is a biryani at all. I'm talking of a teh laga ke jo dum ki biryani, mutton ki biryani. But if you are talking of the Kolkata biryani, that is, people would say, अरे वो तो गरीब हो गए थे नवाब साहब, तो इसलिए उनको आलू डालने पड़े, अंडे डालने पड़े उसमें. That is bullshit. I mean, pardon my French, Russian, and German all together. The problem is the man who could maintain a zoo there, who had a retinue of 2,000 people, was not suffering from poverty. So what he did was that he lightened the biryani in Calcutta according to the climate there. Meat घटा दिया, थोड़ा उसमें आलू डाल दिए, थोड़ा अंडा डाल दिया, and that is not as aromatic, you know. But when you come to a Sindhi biryani, it is even more चूचू का मुरब्बा. उसमें सब्जी भी है. It reminds you of the dhan shak kind of thing of the Parsi food. सो व्हाट आई वुड आर्ग्यू इज कि हर जगह की अपनी बिरयानी है. तलसीरी बिरयानी है, वो फिश बिरयानी मालाबार की है, बट एवरीबडी वुड कॉल इट अ बिरयानी. नाउ बिरयानी बाय द वर्ड, एंड सलमा जी वुड होपफुली बेयर मी आउट, is a Persian of Persian descent. And what goes by the nature of name of biryani in South is the Arab influence, because the Arabs came as traders, uh, sailors to that coast, married local girls, became son-in-laws, Mapilas and Mopila Muslims now. So that is more an Arab influence. And the Arabs did not have a biryani. Now, today, if you go to Hyderabad, you would be faced with another very ironical situation. You would be served something called mandi, which has come from Saudi Arab. कि वो चावल है, उसके ऊपर एक मुर्गा तल के रखा हुआ है, वो that has become the ultimate biryani, because anything which comes from the holy land of Saudi Arab has a section फॉर द बिलीविंग मुस्लिम्स. सो आई वुड नॉट से कि आपको ये बिरयानी पसंद है या वो बिरयानी पसंद है. किसी दिन हमको मन करता है कलकत्ता बिरयानी खाने का, किसी दिन हमारा मन करता है हैदराबादी खाने का, किसी दिन हमारा मन करता है सिर्फ यखनी पुलाव खाने का. अब मैं तो उंगलियां चाटते रह गया जब वासिफुद्दीन डागर साहब के यहाँ, उनकी बड़ी मोहब्बत है मेरे साथ, मेरे ऊपर बड़े करम है, उन्होंने घर पे खाने को बुलाया. You know, I remember his parents very gratefully. I ate bhindi gosht, I ate khichdi, I ate kadhi, I ate korma. Then in the end came pulao. And I felt like kicking myself, Ishan, कि हमने पहले और सारी चीजें कबाब वबाब क्यों खाए. असली चीज तो खाने की ये पुलाव था. उस पुलाव में मलाइयत थी, चावल के दाने दाने में खाने का स्वाद था, गोश्त बहुत खूबसूरती से गला तो मैं कहूंगा नहीं, वो तो प्रेशर कुकर का आता है, ठंड धीमी आंच में अच्छा पका था, पीसेस बड़े चॉइस कट के थे, और जब आप खा रहे थे तो उंगलियां चाटते रह जा रहे थे. तो मुझे लगता है कि ये हमको नहीं भूलना चाहिए कि आप किस वक्त क्या खाना चाहते हैं और आपने क्या बेंचमार्क खाया है. समथिंग व्हिच विल मेक मी साउंड लाइक अ बिट ऑफ अ स्नॉब, बट देयर इज नो अदर वे टू डू सो, इज कितने लोगों को बिरयानी खाने का तमीज है और कितने लोगों ने बिरयानी खाई है सही बनी हुई. Now, I don't think that a biryani is made in a five-star restaurant. It is assembled. I do know it is a good, greatest quality basmati, greatest quality meat, greatest quality saffron, but that does not a biryani make. बिरयानी बनती घर में है. जिन पुराने घरों में एक दिन तय होता था कि हफ्ते में बिरयानी पकेगी, बिरयानी का देग चढ़ेगा, तो नौकर थे, जॉइंट फैमिली हुआ करती थी, सब लोग मिलजुल के काम करते थे, बड़ा देग बनता था. उन घरों में चूंकि हफ्ते में हर एक बार बिरयानी बनती ही बनती थी, वो कायस्थ घर हो या मुसलमान घर, तो वो बिरयानी का जो मजा था, उसमें ना तो जरूरत से ज्यादा मीठा इतर होता था, न केवड़ा था, न केसर था, न उसमें रंग था, एंड यू हैड बिरयानी. तो अब ज्यादातर लोगों ने बिरयानी ऑन ऑर्डर खाई है. बिरयानी ब्लूज की खाई है, बिरयानी बाय किलोज खाई है, बिरयानी बाय किलोज कहिए या कुछ भी कहिए, मगर आपने घर की बनी बिरयानी बहुत कम खाई. और आप जब बिरयानी खाते हैं तो उसको सान के खाते हैं, सालन के संग या कौरमे के संग, आप बिरयानी की माँ बहन कर देते हैं. तो मुझे लगता है कि जो लोग बिरयानी खाने का सलीका नहीं जानते, वो आजकल ये फतवे दे रहे हैं कि कौन सी बिरयानी बेहतर होती है और कौन सी बिरयानी अच्छी थी, और किसमें चावल गला नहीं था, किसमें बासमती खराब थी, किसमें मीट के कट ठीक नहीं थे. तो आई फाइंड दिस अ बिट अम्यूजिंग टू से द लीस्ट, insufferable if it continues longer. तो वो मटका पीर की बिरयानी हो, वो डीज की बिरयानी हो, वो घर में डिलीवर हो रही है, आपने एक मिट्टी की हांडी देखी जिसमें आटा लगा है और ऊपर से सील, आपने कहा ये आ गई, असली चीज आ जाएगी, खोला आपने और दो मुर्गी की टांग मिल गई और आपने खा ली, वो आपने कहा जी बस इस प्राइस में बड़ा अच्छा है, ये डिलीवरी के संग 650 में मिल रही है, नथिंग लाइक। बट आई वुड से दैट आई प्रेफर a pulao any day to biryani, a yakhni pulao any day to biryani.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for such an interesting conversation that we had. I think it took almost it went on almost for an hour, and it was enriching, enlightening, and we got so much to learn, so much to read that you suggested, so much to eat, all the dishes that you named, and so much to watch, all the movies that you mentioned in today's recommendation.
Thank you, Ishan. It's been a great pleasure. They say once a thief, always a thief, once a teacher, always a teacher. You let him speak and he doesn't stop. So thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, everybody who is watching this video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Carvan. And we'll be back with another episode of Carvan recommendations very soon. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.